When it comes to my summer vegetable garden, each year looks different than the year before. There's always changes, but there's a lot that stays the same. Join me today as I share with you 5 plants that I always grow. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and while my Colorado garden is going to be different than your garden where you live, the ideas for which plants we always grow will be the same. There are certain factors I look for when it comes to plant selection, and when I get my seeds and when I actually get live plants, I'm always focused on these 5 goals every year. We gardeners garden for a number of different reasons. To get outside, for the exercise, because it's a nice hobby. We want to grow food for our families, and maybe just because we've got a patch of land that we don't know what to do with. When it comes to the actual selection of the plants on a yearly basis, I suggest developing your own way of looking at gardening. Why are you doing it? And then trying to break it down to at least these 5 things when you determine the plants that you're going to grow every year. Because it's those plants, the ones that keep coming back in our garden plan, that I think really helps add stability to our garden planning. It's a foundation on which everything else can be built. This is my raspberry patch, and this starts off my list of 5. I'm growing raspberries, I've got some blackberries right there, I've got some asparagus. Moving on down the line, I've got strawberries and mint. This whole area falls into the first type of plants that I always grow in my garden. It's the plants that taste good. These raspberries in particular are raspberries that I love to eat. I love wandering through the garden and plucking off a fresh raspberry when it's ripe. I do the same thing with cherry tomatoes. I always grow cherry tomatoes because they taste good. And I love the experience of just plucking one, eating it, and then just stopping and enjoying that amazing flavor. Too often, gardeners choose plants for what they can give us, especially if we're growing it for food, and we begin to lose sight of this wonderful aspect of gardening, and that's choosing a plant purely for the taste. Not the nutrition, not the health factor, nothing else, but just the taste. And there are so many other things in my garden, from peppers to corn to squash to spinach and lettuce, and especially the peas. My granddaughters love coming into the garden and just eating a pea pod right off the plant. There's something special about gardening with that thought in mind. So, a plant you should always grow is a plant that you like to eat. Now, those are the plants that I like to eat. You might not even like raspberries and strawberries and mint and asparagus and all the other plants that I'm growing. That's okay. You make your own list of the plants that you like to eat, that taste good, and grow them every year on a regular basis. And it just adds that little bit of enjoyment to your gardening. The other thing I like to do is to always grow plants that are easy to grow. This is a challenging environment here in Colorado. Very cold winters, very hot summers, and not every plant grows well. So I'm looking for the plants that I can be assured of success. Those cherry tomatoes that taste so good also do very well in my garden. So they're at the top of the list. I grow those tomato plants because they're easy, and of course because they taste good. I grow the peas for the same reason. I grow spinach and turnips and Swiss chard and beets because they will provide me with a harvest every single year. Not all of them taste as good as some of my favorites, but they do well, and I love getting a harvest. If we're going to spend the time putting the seeds in the ground and taking care of them, don't you want that harvest at the end? So focus on those plants that will give you the success without working too hard. And how do you find those plants that are going to be easy in your garden? Well, it's by experimenting. It's trying new plants every single year. Last year, for the first time, I grew delicata squash and loved it. So this year, I'm growing more delicata squash, even at the expense of other squash plants that I normally grow. This one tastes better, it did better, and so now it has a permanent spot in my garden. I wouldn't have known about the delicata squash unless I tried it as a new plant. So put together a list of those plants that you like growing, and then start adding in the plants that you know nothing about, that you're not sure if they're going to do well in your garden, you're not sure if they're going to be easy, you might not even be sure if they're going to taste good, but based on the description or based on somebody else's recommendation, it's worth giving it a try. And you might be surprised. You might stumble across something that is so fantastic, it becomes a permanent part of your garden. Sun Gold cherry tomatoes started that way. It was a new plant to try. I fell in love with it, and I've grown it every year for many years now. And I will continue to grow it because I just like it. It's a wonderful plant. This year, I'm trying some new tomato varieties. I'm trying some new pepper varieties. I'm trying a new cucumber variety. They might not be successful. Last year, I tried 3 different types of cucumbers, and I didn't really like any of them. So I learned. They're no longer on my list to grow again. But I wouldn't have known that unless I had experimented with the new varieties in the first place. So always grow something new. I do, every year. This bed and that bed have garlic growing in them. I love garlic. Garlic is an important part of my diet. And the garlic varieties that you can grow in your garden are so diverse and so amazing and so different to the garlic that you buy in the store. You should be growing garlic. And the category that it falls into is production. I grow a lot of garlic. It's easy, it does well here, but in this bed alone, I can grow hundreds of bulbs of garlic. So I do. And then I dry it, I ferment it, I pickle it, I freeze it, I freeze dry it, and I just leave it whole to use as fresh garlic. There are so many options when you choose plants for the purpose of production, for the harvest. Choosing the kind of plants like garlic that can give you a lot of harvest in a small area is one way to do it. You can also choose the type of plants that continue to give you a harvest over a long period of time. Lettuce and spinach, for instance, you can harvest the outer leaves and the plant will keep growing. So a single plant can produce for months if you harvest it correctly and if you put it in a nice spot in your garden. Those tomatoes that I'm growing are very prolific. And this year, one of those new varieties that I'm trying is Berry's Crazy Cherry, which is supposed to be crazily prolific. I'm growing that plant along with the spinach and the lettuce and the garlic because of how much I can get with a dedicated space in my garden. Fruit trees are another great choice. I have a little mini orchard. Hopefully this year, in its 3rd year, I'll start to get some fruit. But a single apple tree can give you pounds and pounds and pounds of apples, along with a lot of other different types of fruits. So I always grow those kind of plants. I always grow the plants that give me more of a harvest than I can honestly use in some cases. And it's nice to sit back and enjoy your harvest many times it's nicer when you can give some of that harvest away to your friends and family and those in need because you've chosen the plants for their production value. As winter is ending in my garden and as spring is just about to begin, I think the plants I look forward to the most are the ones that fall into this fifth category. In this bed right here, I'm growing strawberries, but not just any strawberry. These are the same strawberries that I've been growing for more than 20 years now. For all that time, when I moved to a new house and start a new garden, I always pot up some of my strawberry runners and put them into the new garden. And why is that? It's because of the memories that those plants evoke. When my kids were little, they would go out and eat fresh strawberries from the garden. And now my daughters do the same. They come to my garden and they eat the same plants from the same variety from more than 20 years ago. I will always grow these strawberries in my garden. It's the same with the raspberries behind me. Sure, I love plucking that raspberry and eating it, but they're the same plants. And I did the same thing, transferring them from one garden to the next as I moved. And when I see my granddaughters eat those raspberries, I think about my daughter doing the same thing all those years ago. So it's the plants that evoke memories that always have a place in my garden. The raspberries and the strawberries are just two. There are a lot of flowers I grow because my grandmother grew the same flowers. So think about that aspect as you're doing your planning, as you're doing your growing. The things that make you smile, the things that bring back that memory that's important to you, those are the kind of plants that should always be grown in your garden. That's the approach I take, and I've never been sorry for it. What are you growing that fall into these different categories? Let me know in the comments below, because I'd like to know which of the plants you're growing for the reason of taste, or because they're easy, or because of their production value, or because they're new, and maybe more importantly, because it makes you think about good times in the past. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.